Disclaimer: this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice and should not replace consultation with a qualified healthcare professional. Always talk to your doctor before starting, stopping, or changing any treatment, supplement, or peptide protocol. Today we are going to explore oxytocin peptides. You may already recognize oxytocin as the so-called love hormone, a molecule tied to feelings of bonding, trust, and social connection. But when we shift our focus from the natural hormone made in the brain to oxytocin in peptide form, the story opens into some very interesting territory. Oxytocin itself is a small peptide. It is naturally produced in the hypothalamus and released by the posterior pituitary gland. In everyday life, it helps regulate childbirth, breastfeeding, and the emotional bonding that follows. But researchers quickly discovered that oxytocin also has broader roles, influencing stress levels, social interactions, and even how we respond to fear and trauma. In peptide form, oxytocin can be synthesized and administered in several different ways. The most common method is intranasal spray, where the peptide is absorbed quickly through the nasal membranes and travels directly into the brain. Injections are also possible, though they are less common for personal use. Oral delivery is largely ineffective since the peptide breaks down in the digestive system before it can act. So, why would someone explore oxytocin peptides? One reason is social anxiety. Studies suggest that oxytocin can reduce the heightened stress response that people feel when faced with social situations. This is not the same as a sedative effect. Instead, it changes how the brain processes social cues, often making interactions feel less threatening and more rewarding. Another area of interest is relationship enhancement. Partners using oxytocin peptides have reported feeling more connected, more trusting, and more empathetic. While these effects can be subtle, they are powerful because they reinforce emotional bonds at a neurological level. It is like giving the brain a gentle reminder to prioritize closeness and compassion. Oxytocin is also being studied in relation to post-traumatic stress disorder. Research suggests that it may soften the emotional intensity of traumatic memories, making therapy more effective. It does not erase the memory, but it may reduce the body's automatic stress reactions when the memory arises. On the biological side, oxytocin plays a role in appetite regulation and metabolism. Some studies indicate that it can decrease food intake and increase energy expenditure. There is ongoing exploration of whether oxytocin peptides might be helpful in managing obesity or metabolic disorders, though this research is still early. When it comes to dosing, there is no universal standard. In research studies, intranasal doses often range from 20 to 40 international units, administered once or twice daily. Because oxytocin acts quickly, effects are usually noticed within minutes, but the duration is relatively short, often 1 to 2 hours. For therapeutic purposes, dosing schedules vary depending on the goal, whether it is social anxiety, relationship therapy, or metabolic support. Potential side effects are generally mild but important to mention. They may include temporary headache, nasal irritation, or mild nausea. Because oxytocin can lower blood pressure, individuals prone to dizziness should be cautious. There is also evidence that overuse may blunt its effects, meaning that more is not always better. Ethically, oxytocin peptides raise unique questions. Since oxytocin can influence trust and bonding, there are debates about whether its use could be manipulative if applied in certain contexts. For example, could someone use oxytocin sprays in a way that influences another person without their knowledge? While this is unlikely in most real-world situations, it is still a topic worth keeping in mind when discussing these compounds. From a scientific perspective, oxytocin shows us just how powerful peptides can be. Here we have a molecule less than 10 amino acids long, and yet it can change not just biology but also psychology and social dynamics. This dual nature is part of why oxytocin has fascinated researchers for decades. Some experimental applications include autism spectrum disorders, where oxytocin may help improve eye contact and social engagement. Early results are mixed, but the possibility of supporting children and adults with these challenges has driven strong research interest. Another area is addiction. Studies are looking at whether oxytocin peptides can reduce cravings and withdrawal symptoms by strengthening social bonds and lowering stress. If you are thinking about oxytocin peptides in a personal health context, it is important to remember that access is limited. Oxytocin is a prescription medication in many countries and is primarily used in obstetrics to induce labor or reduce bleeding after childbirth. The intranasal versions used for research are not always available for general use, and their legal status varies. There is also the practical question of consistency. Because oxytocin's effects are short-lived, its benefits are often situational. For example, taking oxytocin before a therapy session or a social gathering might reduce anxiety and promote connection, but it is unlikely to create lasting change without repeated, structured use combined with other supportive approaches. From a neurochemical standpoint, oxytocin interacts with dopamine and serotonin pathways, amplifying the brain's reward system. This is part of why people feel uplifted and trusting after oxytocin release. It creates a loop where social connection feels good and the desire for connection increases. Let's think about practical examples. Imagine someone who struggles with public speaking. A small dose of oxytocin spray taken beforehand might reduce the fear response and make them feel more comfortable engaging with the audience. Or consider a couple going through counseling. Used alongside therapy, oxytocin might help each partner feel more open and less defensive, making the process smoother. But again, the key is context. Oxytocin peptides are not magic bullets. They work best when paired with genuine effort, healthy environments, and intentional practice. They can open a door, but the person has to walk through it. One of the most fascinating aspects is how oxytocin blends the line between chemistry and emotion. Love, trust, and empathy feel intangible, but oxytocin reminds us that biology is deeply woven into these experiences. At the same time, we should avoid oversimplifying. Oxytocin does not guarantee love or erase fear. It nudges, it guides, it amplifies certain signals, but it does not dictate behavior. As with all peptides, we are still at the early stages of understanding the full scope of oxytocin's potential. Future research may reveal long-term benefits, new delivery methods, or expanded therapeutic applications. For now, what we know is promising but requires caution, respect, and further study. Disclaimer: this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice and should not replace consultation with a qualified healthcare professional. Always talk to your doctor before starting, stopping, or changing any treatment, supplement, or peptide protocol. Thanks for listening. Keep learning and stay curious.